If you're joining us today, you're likely looking for a clear, structured, and actionable understanding of a deeply complex topic. So today, we're laying out the caregiver's roadmap, navigating dementia and Alzheimer's. We're going to move step by step from the broad clinical facts right down to the granular, practical details of evening care. Whether you're just preparing for the future or you're navigating this reality right now, this explainer is designed to be a supportive, empathetic, and reliable guide through what is undeniably a heavy and multifaceted journey. Here is our roadmap for today. 1. Understanding dementia. 2. The 7 clinical stages. 3. The caregiver's planning checklist. 4. Tips for effective communication. And 5. Mastering evening care routines. Let's get right into it.
Section 1, Understanding Alzheimer's and Dementia.
Okay, let's dive into this and establish our clinical baseline. When we hear the word dementia, we almost instantly think of Alzheimer's disease, right? Well, surprisingly, while it is the most common subtype, it accounts for less than half, just 47% of cases seen in memory clinics. It's a very broad umbrella. Vascular dementia takes up a significant 19%, and a massive 27% are other or mixed dementias, which, are becoming increasingly recognized in primary care. Knowing exactly what subtype you're dealing with, that is absolutely crucial. It's your very first fundamental step in mapping out the road ahead.
Moving on to Section 2, the 7 clinical stages.
Let's see how this builds. This framework was originally developed by Dr. Barry Reisberg at the NYU Grossman School of Medicine, and it basically acts as a staircase of progression. Let's look at the first 3, what we call pre-dementia steps. Stage 1 is normal cognitive health, but Stage 2, subjective memory loss, is fascinating. Research shows this stage of age-related forgetfulness can quietly last for up to 15 years. The individual notices they can't recall names as easily, but it's really not obvious to outside observers. By Stage 3, mild cognitive impairment, the deficits are subtle, but they're real. For example, a highly structured person might suddenly struggle to organize a complex social event, like a dinner party, or they might repeat questions noticeably. The staircase is descending, but slowly. Now we step down into the actual dementia stages. In Stage 4, mild dementia, the cognitive load just gets too heavy for complex tasks. A person might struggle to read a menu at a restaurant or write out a check. By Stage 5, moderate dementia, the individual can no longer manage on their own and begins to struggle with basic daily choices, like picking the right clothing for the weather. Stage 6, severe decline, brings profound functional changes. They might need help with the actual sequence of dressing, perhaps putting an arm in the wrong sleeve or putting clothing on backward, eventually leading to the loss of bathing and toileting abilities. Finally, Stage 7 is very severe dementia. This is where the ability to speak, walk, and even sit up independently is eventually lost, requiring continuous 24-hour comfort care. All right, Section 3, the caregiver's planning checklist.
So the crucial point here is that we must shift gears from the clinical head knowledge to the practical hands-on side of caregiving. A caregiver's priorities absolutely have to dynamically shift as the disease progresses. In the early stages, your checklist is highly logistical, securing a legal power of attorney for property and personal care, consolidating bank accounts, registering for support groups, and setting up safety systems like MedicAlert. But in the late stages, logistics shift entirely over to environment and emotion. It becomes all about comfort care, preparing for a potential facility relocation, decorating a room with seasonal and familiar items to make it feel like home, and connecting through sensory experiences like gentle touch, familiar music, and reading aloud.
Next up, Section 4, tips for effective communication. We've covered the hands, now let's enter the heart of daily care. When reality gets confused, and trust me, it will, you really have to avoid the instinct to argue or correct. Arguing over a confused reality only breeds anxiety. Instead, you want to master the art of distraction and redirection by connecting on a feeling level. Now, what's really interesting about this approach is how you validate the emotion first. I see you're feeling sad. I'm sorry you're upset. And then immediately, you offer a gentle pivot. Let's go get something to eat. You are validating their very real emotion while smoothly redirecting the brain's focus. It's a lifesaver. To make these daily interactions smoother, start by simply limiting background noise and getting right down on their eye level before speaking. Instead of overwhelming them with open-ended questions, offer visual choices. Hold up 2 shirts and let them point to the one they want. Break every single activity into small, manageable steps. And here is a massive paradigm shift for you. Don't force short-term memory. A person with dementia might not remember the lunch they had 45 minutes ago, but they can vividly recall their life 45 years ago. Tap into that deep well of the distant past. And above all, maintain your shared sense of humor. Sharing a laugh remains a profound point of connection, long after words fade. Finally, Section 5, Mastering Evening Care Routines. For a lot of caregivers, evenings are just the most daunting part of the day. You might be wondering, why is that? Well, it's because of a common phenomenon known as late-day agitation or sundowning. As the day winds down, the brain simply becomes fatigued. Thinking takes immense energy. At the same time, shifting lighting creates unfamiliar shadows in the room, which triggers anxiety. Combine this cognitive fatigue with background noise, clutter, or even physical stiffness, and you have a perfect storm for sensory overload and disorientation. It's not necessarily a medical crisis, it's more like a cognitive pressure cooker. So, to counter this, you can build a highly reliable evening calm routine. Start by managing the environment, dim the bright lights, turn off the TV, and mute the background noise. Next, ground their senses to soothe the nervous system. You can use a warm blanket, some lavender lotion, or a hot drink. From there, introduce a calming Montessori-inspired activity. Simple tasks like folding soft towels or sorting objects rely on deep procedural memory, which really reduces stress and restores a sense of purpose and confidence. Finally, always close with comfort, using a soft, reassuring phrase like, "You're safe, I'm right here with you." Focusing on sensory support brilliantly illustrates exactly what we're talking about here. The ultimate goal of evening care is predictability. When words fail, sensory tools like soft lighting, warm textures, and gentle scents communicate safety directly to the nervous system. Remember that as a caregiver, you don't need to diagnose every single moment of distress. You just need to notice what might be adding pressure. Your calm presence, your slowed pacing, and your gentle tone become the absolute most powerful anchor in their world. As we close out this explainer, I want to leave you with a reflection for your own caregiving journey. At the end of a long day, ask yourself, what brought comfort today? What small victory can I hold on to? Caregiving is a marathon of grace and endurance, but it also begs a much larger question. As our understanding of the brain evolves, how might we entirely redefine what it means to live well with dementia in the years to come? The roadmap is always changing, and there is always more to learn. Thank you so much for learning with us today.
Welcome to this explainer. If you've ever cared for an older adult, especially someone living with dementia, you already know the drill. The sun goes down and the challenges absolutely go up. Restful sleep, calm evenings, they can start to feel completely impossible. Well, today we're going to dig into exactly why that happens and, more importantly, what we can actually do about it.
It's a question that echoes through homes and care facilities every single night, right? Why does a good night's sleep feel so impossible as we age? In this explainer, we're unpacking the biological reasons behind all that nighttime wakefulness and anxiety. And we're going to lean heavily into practical, non-pharmacological solutions. Simple, everyday strategies to help you bring peace back to the evening without having to rely on heavy medications.
All right, Section 1, the Aging Sleep Challenge. Before we even touch on dementia, we really need to look at what happens to our sleep just as a normal part of getting older. Fundamentally, our sleep architecture just changes. We literally get less of that deep, restorative, slow wave sleep. On top of that, our internal clocks shift forward, which means older adults naturally get tired earlier and wake up way earlier. Throw in physical issues like arthritis pain, restless legs, or having to use the bathroom frequently, and you get highly fragmented nights. The sleep is just lighter, and it's so much easier to disrupt.
But you add dementia into the mix, and the sleep challenge goes way deeper than just an aging body. That brings us to Section 2, the broken biological clock.
To understand this, we need to meet a tiny but absolutely crucial part of the brain, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or the SCN for short. Think of it as your body's master biological clock. It sits right in the hypothalamus and literally uses light signals coming in from your eyes to tell your body, hey, it's time to be awake, or okay, time to produce sleep hormones like melatonin.
Now, a healthy SCN sends out strong, rhythmic signals. But aging, and especially Alzheimer's disease, causes profound neuronal loss right inside this master clock. So those signals, they get completely scrambled. Melatonin levels drop like a rock. Because of this neurodegeneration, the entire circadian system becomes incredibly fragile. The brain, quite literally, loses its ability to reliably tell time.
And this broken biological clock leads us directly to Section 3, Understanding Sundowning. If you're a caregiver, you know this is one of the most notoriously stressful experiences out there.
Sundowning usually peaks in the late afternoon and early evening, right as the daylight starts fading. It's a cluster of really distressing symptoms. We're talking severe confusion, sudden anxiety, pacing, and wandering. Sometimes it even leads to aggressive behavior or vivid hallucinations. It essentially turns those evening hours into a marathon, leaving the person experiencing it and you, the caregiver, just completely exhausted. If you take away just one thing from this explainer, please let it be this. Sundowning is a neurological symptom of circadian disruption. It is absolutely not a behavioral choice. It's vital to remember that when someone with dementia is pacing the halls or hallucinating at 5 p.m., they aren't acting out on purpose just to be difficult. Their brain is experiencing a severe, deeply disorienting biological malfunction.
Because that internal clock can't regulate itself anymore, older adults with dementia become incredibly sensitive to the world around them. Let's get into Section 4, Environmental Triggers.
There is a massive, direct link between care facility environments and sleep quality. Studies on nursing management show that suboptimal environmental conditions, things we might totally overlook, significantly bump up the risk of insomnia and late-day agitation. Basically, when the internal clock fails, the external environment has to step up and do the heavy lifting. The data here is actually wild. Look at this. Failing to optimize the room temperature increases the risk of insomnia by over 5 times. And continuous poorly controlled noise or inadequate lighting, those nearly quadruple the risk. Even something like suboptimal cleanliness plays a huge role. So whether you're in a long-term care setting or at home, managing these specific sensory inputs isn't just a nice-to-have luxury. It is a critical, frontline medical intervention for sleep.
So what actually triggers a sundowning episode in the late afternoon? Well, fading natural light creates these long, confusing shadows on the floor that, to someone with dementia, might look like holes or even intruders. Then there's environmental overstimulation. Think about the chaos of a nursing shift change or a busy family kitchen making dinner. That completely overwhelms a fragile nervous system. Add in unmet physical needs like hidden hunger or lack of activity earlier in the day, and boom, you've got the perfect storm for evening anxiety.
Okay, so how do we fix this? Let's move to Section 5, Sensory and Calming Strategies, and start building out your toolkit, because once we understand those triggers, we can actually design proactive solutions. Leaning into non-pharmacological sensory solutions is incredibly powerful. Low-level sensory stimulation actually flips the switch on the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest system. By carefully managing what a person sees, hears, smells, and feels, we can naturally induce a biological state of calm. And the best part? We completely avoid the dangerous side effects of antipsychotics or heavy sleep meds that so often get misused here. Here are a few highly effective interventions you can literally try tonight. First, sedative music, meaning slow tempo, soft volume, smooth melodies. This can lower stress hormones and help sync up breathing. Then there's aromatherapy. Inhaling lavender has been clinically shown to quiet the mind and boosts deep sleep. Or try providing gentle, deep pressure with a weighted blanket, or even a soft touch hand massage. That physical grounding drastically cuts down on nighttime agitation. All right, as we head into our final section, Section 6, Caregiver Tools for Rest, let's zoom out a bit. How do we structure the whole day to support a struggling biological clock? Believe it or not, a good night's sleep actually begins the moment you wake up. You want to kick off the day with strong Zeitgebers, which is just a fancy science term for time cues. Flooding the room with bright morning sunlight tells that broken SCN, hey, it is definitely daytime. Follow that up with low-impact physical activity and meaningful social engagement. This builds up a healthy sleep pressure in the brain. Oh, and this is key. Limit afternoon naps and cut off caffeine early so you don't relieve that sleep pressure before bedtime. Then, as the afternoon shifts into evening, you've got to pivot your strategy. First, proactively turn on the bright interior lights before the sun goes down. This prevents those confusing, scary shadows from forming. Then, as bedtime gets closer, transition into a highly controlled environment. A quiet, cool bedroom. Use blackout curtains to block out streetlights, and definitely turn on a white noise machine to mask the sound of other folks in the house or facility staff walking around. Which leads me to a really fantastic practical tip for caregivers. the sleep cart. Try putting together a dedicated basket or cart with warm fuzzy socks, a comfortable eye mask, some lavender sachets, maybe some unscented lotion for a quick hand massage, and a favorite soft blanket. Making this wind-down routine a tangible, consistent ritual signals to the brain that it's finally safe to let go and relax.
Just one final, absolutely vital reminder here. If sleep disruptions suddenly spike out of nowhere, you have to put on your detective hat. Always consult a doctor to rule out hidden physical issues. An older adult with dementia might not be able to tell you, hey, I have a painful UTI, or my lower back is killing me, or even that a new medication is making them jittery. Undiagnosed sleep apnea and restless legs are also major, hidden culprits that require medical attention.
Okay, let's wrap this up. By understanding the underlying biology of the aging brain and taking proactive control of the sensory environment, we absolutely can help our loved ones find the rest they so desperately need. So I'll leave you with this question to chew on. What is one sensory change you can make tonight to bring peace to someone's tomorrow? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.
Hey there, and welcome to this explainer. If you're tuning in today, chances are you know firsthand the profound and honestly often exhausting daily realities of caring for a loved one with moderate to severe dementia. It's a journey that takes immense patience and love for sure, but it can also leave you feeling utterly depleted when you're faced with those unpredictable behaviors. So today, we're going to look at some genuinely fascinating, evidence-based strategies to help you navigate those really tough moments. Okay, let's dive right in. So, how do we calm the chaos of dementia? It's literally the question at the heart of daily caregiving. If you've ever felt completely helpless in the face of neuropsychiatric symptoms, you know, the sudden agitation, that deep anxiety, the restless pacing, or those completely unpredictable outbursts, please know that you are absolutely not alone. And more importantly, it isn't just part of the disease that you simply have to endure without any tools. There are actual environmental ways to ease this distress. Just consider this absolutely wild number for a second. 25%. A landmark study back in 2010 showed that an enriched environment can contribute up to a 25% increase in the number of brain connections. I mean, that's huge. Even in a brain affected by cognitive decline, the environment around us still wields incredible power. It can either add to the confusion, or as we're going to explore today, it can be purposefully designed to calm the nervous system and foster a real sense of connection.
All right, here's our quick roadmap for today's explainer. We'll start with the dementia sensory connection, then enter the snoozlin room, look at real benefits for caregivers, outline principles of sensory design, and finally, build your sensory toolkit.
Okay, Section 1, the dementia sensory connection, understanding the root of agitation. You know, the human mind requires connection and environmental stimulation to thrive, much like a tree needs sunlight and water to grow. There's this really common misconception that challenging behaviors, like aggression or wandering, are purely symptoms of memory loss. But actually, they're often the result of a brain desperately struggling with sensory deprivation. Or, on the flip side, it's dealing with a confusing, overly noisy environment that it just can't decode anymore.
In fact, researchers from the VA health systems hit the nail on the head with this premise. They stated, neuropsychiatric symptoms may result from periods of sensory deprivation. As dementia progresses, our primary senses, sight, hearing, touch, taste, and smell, they tend to deteriorate. And when those sensory inputs fade or get scrambled, the world just becomes a chaotic, frightening place. So that distress we see, it's a completely natural reaction to all that chaos. Moving right along to Section 2. Enter the snoozlin room, stimulating the senses. So, snoozlin, or multisensory stimulation if you prefer, is the simultaneous stimulation of two or more primary senses to bring pleasure and well-being. Now, I know that sounds like a super complex medical term, but the core idea is actually beautifully simple. It's all about intentionally reactivating those deteriorating senses through targeted, non-directive activities. It's not about forcing a task on someone. It's about creating an environment where they can explore stimuli completely at their own pace. Now, traditional snoozlin environments actually kicked off in the Netherlands back in the 1980s. These commercial setups are pretty high-tech too. They feature specialized equipment like
gently bubbling water tubes, glowing fiber optics, cool moving shapes projected right onto the walls, and even integrated aromatherapy. The whole goal here is gentle, controlled stimulation. So what's the logic behind all this? Well, by intentionally pacing the stimulation and making sensory cues incredibly clear, we drastically reduce the heavy demand on the central nervous system. Think about it. If a room is offering weakened or confusing signals, a person with dementia has to work overtime just to understand where they are, and that leads to major cognitive fatigue and anxiety. By enhancing the sensory signal, basically making the space clear and calming, we help them make sense of their surroundings. Which brings us to Section 3, Real Benefits for Caregivers, What the Evidence Says. All right, let's do a quick clinical reality check here. When researchers review all the controlled trials, they actually find that multisensory stimulation doesn't have a consistent, long-term durable effect on behavior. It doesn't cure the symptoms permanently. However, and this is a massive however, the short-term benefits are incredibly well documented, widely reported, and highly, highly valuable. Just take a look at these proven short-term benefits. Time spent in these environments actively reduces anxiety and agitation. It lowers apathy, decreases restlessness, and visibly reduces outbursts. It also helps enhance both verbal and nonverbal communication, and just generally improves overall mood. Now, science might call that a temporary short-term effect, but let's be real. If you're a caregiver just trying to survive a difficult Tuesday afternoon, 45 minutes of peace, reduced agitation, and a genuine moment of connection, that isn't just a short-term benefit, that is an absolute game changer. Next up, Section 4, Principles of Sensory Design, Bringing It Home. Guided by some fantastic research out of Kingston University, we find this really vital principle. Making the room feel familiar will help with transition into the room, and residents will be more motivated to go into the space. You see, sensory design isn't about sci-fi gadgets or alien-looking landscapes. It is deeply rooted in utilizing personal history, familiar routines, and cultural backgrounds to create a profound sense of safety. In clinical circles, they call this sensory pacing. It's basically the Goldilocks principle of striking a perfect balance. Think about how you instinctively turn down the car radio when you're driving around trying to find a specific address. Your brain can only handle so much input at once. Avoiding overstimulation is just as crucial as providing the stimulation in the first place. If you flood the senses with way too many noises, lights, and smells all at once, you risk causing way more anxiety, which totally defeats the entire purpose. Take a look at this DIY sensory cushion, for example. Notice the design. It's got zippers, ribbons, and different textures to keep the hands engaged, but the aesthetics are really toned down and mature. That's because a vital principle of sensory design for dementia care is dignity. These interventions have to remain sophisticated and age-appropriate. Even if an item is playful, it should absolutely never look like a child's toy or feel patronizing in any way. And finally, Section 5. Building your sensory toolkit. Low-cost, practical solutions. This sensory toolkit framework, which actually comes directly from that Kingston University guide, breaks down how to easily target each specific sense. We're talking sight, touch, taste, smell, sound, and movement, all using everyday items you probably already have lying around the house right now. Let's rapidly run through how accessible this really is. For sight, you can just use reflective materials, shiny fabrics, or simple colored lights. For touch, maybe experiment with temperature like a warm towel, or textures like velvet, or even a gentle breeze from a fan. For taste, highly stimulating foods like citrus fruits, peppermint, or a bit of sherbet can be super engaging. For smell, you don't need fancy diffusers. A simple lavender bag, the smell of fresh coffee, or familiar everyday foods work absolute wonders. For sound, try playing nature soundscapes like birdsong or ocean waves. And for movement, something as classic as a rocking chair or a gently vibrating cushion offers some really deep proprioceptive feedback. The whole point is, the amazing benefits of Snoozlin are completely achievable without spending a fortune. Now, we can actually take this a step further by layering these senses. A tactile cushion, for instance, can offer visual contrast with bright colors, tactile feedback with different fabrics, and interactive elements like deep pockets for hiding objects. When you combine stimuli, let's say holding a textured cushion while listening to a really familiar piece of music, you create this incredibly rich, engaging mini environment that beautifully grounds the person in the present moment. Okay, so how do you actually put this into practice? Well, here is a super simple 4-step procedure for facilitating a session. First, just make sure you're in a quiet, safe space with minimal distractions. Second, introduce just 2 or 3 tailored sensory items. So maybe play a video of the beach with wave sounds and hand them a box of smooth shells to touch. Third,
And this is absolutely critical. Step back and let them explore the items at their own pace in a totally non-directive way. Giving them control builds their confidence and self-worth. And finally, just observe and monitor for any signs of overstimulation or discomfort. So we've covered the science of sensory deprivation, the fascinating history of snoozling rooms, and how you can build your very own toolkit to calm the nervous system. Now, I want you to look around your home right now. What simple sound, familiar smell, or comforting texture is already sitting in your living room or kitchen that could bring your loved one just 5 minutes of genuine peace today? Remember, the environment shapes the mind, and you hold the power to shape that environment. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and we'll see you next time. Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we are going to completely flip the script on how we think about a really crucial aspect of healthcare, rehabilitation, and aging. We're diving deep into the profound, highly evidence-based world of recreation therapy. So let's just jump right in. Okay, let's address the elephant in the room right off the bat. When you hear the words recreation or leisure in a healthcare setting, maybe in long-term care, a dementia unit, or physical rehab, what actually comes to mind? For a lot of us, the immediate image is a group of folks passively playing bingo, basically just passing the time while the medical staff focuses on the real work. But as you're going to see today, that assumption isn't just slightly off, it is fundamentally wrong. See, there's a really stark contrast between two very different concepts in care. On one hand, we have diversional activities, and this is exactly what it sounds like, simply staying busy, filling time, or honestly just offering a distraction from illness. Sometimes this even bleeds into what the literature calls taboo leisure, like using substances to self-medicate. But on the totally opposite end of the spectrum, we have recreation therapy. This is a highly systematic, goal-based intervention. It's entirely rooted in assessed clinical outcomes and holistic health. It doesn't just kill time, it intentionally creates purpose. To really ground us here, let's look at the formal definition. A recreation therapist is an allied health professional. Just like a physical therapist or a speech pathologist, they use purposeful, goal-based interventions to address assessed needs. Their whole aim is to enhance overall health, well-being, and quality of life for folks facing barriers due to illness, disability, or maybe sudden life changes. Essentially, they're using the inherent power of play and leisure as actual medicine.
Here's our roadmap for this explainer. We'll cover 1. More than just games. 2. The 5 health domains. 3. Real results in data. 4. Collaboration in patient care. And 5. Rebuilding a meaningful life.
All right, Section 1, more than just games. We're moving way past that myth of mere diversion.
This quote from a 2008 study by Dupuy absolutely hits the nail on the head. The existing evidence is clear that leisure can provide meaningful opportunities for continued engagement in life and is essential for aging well. That's the crux of it, right? Leisure isn't an optional luxury. It's literally a life-sustaining requirement. Without it, patients experience crushing loneliness, depression, and boredom, especially in places like long-term care or hospice settings. Moving on to Section 2, the 5 health domains. This is the holistic framework for care. You see, recreation therapists aren't just guessing what a patient needs. They operate across 5 very specific pillars of health. Physical functioning involves things like strength and mobility. Cognitive targets memory and problem solving. Then you've got emotional and psychological functioning, super important for mood regulation and coping with the trauma of an illness. Social functioning helps folks combat isolation. And finally, spiritual functioning, which provides inner peace and meaning. By hitting all 5 of these domains, the therapist is ensuring a truly 360-degree approach to recovery.
So how exactly do we translate leisure into medicine? Well, think about music and art therapy. It isn't just about painting a pretty picture. It's a targeted intervention specifically designed to stimulate memory, encourage speech, and uplift mood, which, by the way, is a real game changer for dementia patients. Or take adaptive sports. They aren't just for fun, they're engineered to improve physical strength and even regulate healthy sleep patterns. Every single activity is a calculated, evidence-based intervention disguised as a good time.
Which brings us to Section 3, Real Results and Data. Let's look at the actual clinical impact of play.
Look at this number, 0.64. In a major meta-analysis looking at the effects of therapeutic recreation programs on elderly participants, researchers found a moderate overall improvement effect size of 0.64. And if you know clinical research, you know that is a highly significant number. It proves these programs are doing so much more than just putting a smile on someone's face for an hour. They're creating sustained, measurable improvements in a patient's overall health. And check this out, another incredibly compelling data point. 0.40 represents the standardized mean difference in global cognition improvement derived specifically from structured, music-based interventions in dementia patients. By carefully applying music, say activating sight, hearing, and motor skills all at once, therapists can literally boost attention, memory, and executive function. It's fascinating.
But hey, the value of recreation therapy isn't just in what it adds, it's in the negative outcomes it actively takes away. When facilities implement these customized programs, the evidence shows a sharp decrease in falls and fall-related injuries. We see a lowered reliance on antipsychotic medications and physical restraints, and we see a massive drop in responsive behaviors like agitation for folks with cognitive impairments. It's literally saving the healthcare system money while vastly improving the patient's day-to-day life.
Next up, Section 4, Collaboration in Patient Care. Here's how this fits into the broader healthcare ecosystem. So, recreation therapists absolutely do not work in a silo. They are right there, side by side with other professionals. For example, if a physical therapist sets a specific mobility goal, the recreation therapist might design an adaptive dance program or a walking group. That way, the patient gets to practice those exact mobility skills, but in a real-world, highly motivating environment. It's a deeply collaborative, interdisciplinary team. We're talking recreation therapists sharing the table with PTs, OTs, nurses, social workers, and physicians. Imagine a rehab setting where a doctor wants to know how a patient is adapting emotionally to a new disability. The recreation therapist can provide amazing insights because they actually see the patient applying their skills in real-life social settings. They see the patient's true level of confidence. To make all this work seamlessly, recreation therapists use a rigorous clinical process known as APIE. First, they assess the client's needs. Second, they plan individualized goals based on those 5 health domains. Third, they implement the interventions, the adaptive sports, the cognitive games, the whole shebang. And finally, they evaluate the outcomes, documenting progress and tweaking the plan as needed. It's a highly systematic, proven methodology. And finally, Section 5, Rebuilding a Meaningful Life. Because really, that is the ultimate goal of all of this.
I want you to really think about this quote from Carruthers and DeGale Hood. People with disabilities and illnesses want to do more than recover functioning. They want to build a life of meaning and engagement, and they want to feel they are powerful agents in their own lives. Guys, this is the absolute heartbeat of recreation therapy. Medicine can heal the body, sure, but recreation therapy, it helps heal the person. It gives them back their autonomy, their identity, and their joy.
Which leaves us with this final, pretty big question. When we look at our healthcare systems, our long-term care homes, our rehab facilities, are we actually doing enough to ensure that aging and recovery maintain a life full of purpose? Because if we're only treating the physical symptoms and totally ignoring the human need for connection and play, we are really only doing half the job. That is the paradigm shift of recreation therapy. Thanks so much for joining me today, everyone. Keep asking questions, keep looking at the data, and I'll see you in the next explainer.
Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're taking a really close, compassionate look
at one of the most emotionally exhausting, but also highly practical realities of caring for someone with dementia. We are going to explore this whole phenomenon of repetitive questioning. We'll unpack the fascinating and, yes, sometimes heartbreaking science behind why it actually happens, and then we're going to arm you with some real, actionable strategies to handle it. So whether you're a full-time caregiver, a family member, or a professional, the goal here is to completely shift your perspective and give you some practical tools to make your days just a little bit easier.
Have you finished your homework? Have you finished your homework? Have you finished your homework?
Look, if you've ever listened to music on a classic vinyl record, you know exactly what happens when the needle hits a speck of dust or a tiny scratch. It skips, it gets stuck, you hear the exact same 3 seconds of a song over and over and over again until somebody physically fixes the problem. Well, in Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia, memory blips create a highly similar effect. You know, you could be having this wonderful, totally normal conversation about a recent football game, and suddenly your loved one just shifts gears entirely and asks if you've finished your homework. So you answer them, you go right back to your pleasant football chat, and then literally 2 minutes later, they ask again. This right here is the daily skipping record reality that we call conversation looping. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what we're up against. Dealing with memory loss and the overall impact of the disease ranks right at the very top of caregiving challenges, coming in at 25%. But right alongside major issues like agitation, we see repetitive speech or actions ranking as the primary challenge for 12% of caregivers. Furthermore, just handling the sheer stress of it all and finding the patience to cope rank right behind memory loss. So if you find yourself totally losing your patience when you hear that exact same question for the 30th time before lunch, listen, you are not alone. Your frustration is completely valid. Statistically speaking, it's literally one of the absolute hardest parts of this entire journey. To really get a handle on this, we kind of need to formally define what we're looking at. Conversation looping falls under this broader umbrella of repetitive behaviors, or RBs. Now look, we all repeat ourselves sometimes when we aren't paying attention, right? But as Dr. Ira E. Hyman Jr., who's a professor of psychology, explains, with cognitive impairment, the actual physical work of binding the elements of an experience into a personal memory is completely disrupted. So whether the person is asking a question every 2 minutes, constantly packing and unpacking a purse, or just rhythmically rubbing a table, we have to remember this is an involuntary symptom of mild to moderate dementia. It is not intentional harassment. They literally do not know they just asked you that question. To truly remove the blame and ease that frustration you might be feeling, we have to look at the neurobiology. Like, why does the brain actually do this? Well, the science points straight to the basal ganglia. These are the largest subcortical structures in the human forebrain, and they heavily influence our motor behavior, our emotions, and our cognition. See, our brains have these incredible cortical striatal circuits. Basically, they're just feedback loops that help us select and sequence our actions based on whatever is going on in our environment. But when deterioration happens in these frontal striatal circuits, the brain simply loses its ability to inhibit existing urges. The feedback loop snaps. The patient essentially becomes trapped in a stimulus-driven behavior, totally unable to switch to a new behavioral set. It's basically a mechanical failure of the brain's stop button. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how these repetitions actually show up totally differently depending on the specific type of dementia a person has. In Alzheimer's disease, about 60% of patients exhibit repetitive behaviors, and it leans heavily toward verbal repetition, repeating questions or telling the same stories. And this is largely driven by that poor recall and episodic amnesia that is so characteristic of Alzheimer's. However, in frontotemporal dementia, or FTD, a staggering 80% of patients exhibit stereotypic behaviors. But here's the wild part. The severity of the repetition here doesn't actually correlate with their memory score. Instead, these compulsions are tied directly to damage and lower energy, or hypometabolism, in the right orbital frontal region of the brain. So the underlying disease literally dictates the flavor of the loop. So the crucial point is this. We know the brain circuits are failing, sure, but the psychological needs of the actual human being sitting right in front of us, those are still very much intact. And this means we have to make an empathy shift. Instead of just groaning internally and thinking, oh my gosh, they already asked me that, we have to train ourselves to take a beat, pause, and ask, okay, what is the question underneath the question? Because people with dementia who ask questions repeatedly are almost always trying to express a specific concern, cope with some kind of internal frustration, or signal a really profound sense of insecurity. Which leads us perfectly to this incredibly powerful guiding principle. The care response should answer the emotion first and the facts second. This is huge, guys. because short-term memory loss is continuously erasing your factual answers. Trying to use cold, hard logic is just a losing battle. The fact you give them, it's going to vanish in 60 seconds anyway. But the emotion, the fear, the anxiety, the intense boredom, that is going to remain active and totally unresolved. Caregivers absolutely must learn to address that lingering emotional need instead of the facts.
Let's play detective with some real-world examples just to see how this works in practice. So say they keep asking what time is dinner. Well, they might not actually care about the physical time on the clock. They might just be hungry, or maybe they're feeling super anxious about their daily routine being off. If they ask, "Where is my daughter?" giving them a geographical location like she's at work won't help. What they are really saying to you is, "I feel lost and I need the safety that my daughter represents." So you provide reassurance. And if they ask, "Have you finished your homework?" they're likely seeking a connection to their past role as a caring parent. You don't correct them, you validate their care. It's a total game changer. So, how do we implement this? Here are some bite-sized, rapid-fire communication adjustments you can literally start making today. First off, keep your answers brief. Long, drawn-out explanations totally overwhelm a declining brain. Maintain eye contact and keep a really calm, soothing tone of voice. Your nonverbal communication is huge here. Use visual aids like big clocks or clear written signs. Sometimes reading an answer actually helps it stick a little better than hearing it. But above all else, do not argue or correct their facts. Trying to force them back into our reality, it only breeds anger. You have to step into their alternate reality. And always, always do a quick mental check. Are they simply in pain, hungry, or tired? Because basic needs so often disguise themselves as repetitive questions. Let's move to and see how this builds into an actual physical strategy for breaking the cycle. Redirecting the loop is essentially a 3-step dance. Step 1, respond calmly and briefly to the repetition. Step 2, address that underlying emotion we talked about with gentle reassurance, maybe a comforting touch. Step 3, distract them by turning the behavior into a purposeful activity. For example, if they're rhythmically and repetitively rubbing their hand across the dining room table, don't just snap and tell them to stop. Hand them a soft cloth and ask if they can help you dust. Boom, you've just validated their physical need to move, addressed their underlying boredom, and redirected them into feeling helpful and connected. And hey, we also cannot ignore the room around us. You absolutely must reduce environmental triggers. Quiet the noise to calm the mind. Environmental factors play a massive, massive role in exacerbating these repetitive behaviors. Think about it, a television blaring the news in the background, a chaotic, overstimulating room, or conversely, a total lack of purposeful activity that results in severe boredom. All of these things are guaranteed to throw a compromised brain into a loop. Honestly, sometimes the very best treatment for a repetitive, disruptive vocalization isn't some new medication, it's literally just turning off the news, putting on some calming music, and altering the room to match the patient's sensory needs. Now, doing all of this day in and day out, it requires a tremendous amount of energy. So we have to talk about you, the caregiver. As Dr. Julie Chandler notes, fatigue is one of the major things that causes caregivers to just hit the end of the rope when it comes to patients. That constant repetition takes a severe, undeniable toll. You have to watch for these normal but completely dangerous warning signs of caregiver stress. Are you experiencing exhaustion and sleeplessness? Are you suddenly crying at minor upsets or snapping at your family members? Are you withdrawing socially and totally giving up your hobbies? Having trouble concentrating? Guys, these are giant flashing red lights telling you that you are heading straight toward burnout. Recognizing those signs is step 1. Taking action is step 2. If you are facing total exhaustion, you must ask family or look into community programs for help. Let's be clear, asking for help is not a sign of inadequate caregiving, it is an absolute necessity. You literally cannot do this alone. If you're paralyzed by anxiety, sit down and start planning for future care and finances so the unknown becomes known. If anger and frustration are boiling over, join a support group. Talking with people who truly understand what it's like to answer the exact same question 50 times a day is incredibly validating. And to combat that social withdrawal, you must fiercely protect your personal hobbies and friendships. Your identity outside of being a caregiver absolutely matters. So as we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with this final provocative thought. We know for a fact the record is going to skip. It's a symptom of a changing brain, right? It's not a flaw in their character or yours. But the next time that record skips, are you going to spend your precious energy fighting the words? Or will you take a deep breath, look beneath the surface, and answer the emotion? When you shift your focus from the cold facts to the underlying feelings, you empower yourself to respond with the kind of grace, patience, and deep connection that both you and your loved one truly deserve. Welcome to this explainer.
Look, if you're a caregiver, you already know the unbelievable dedication it takes to support a loved one with dementia. Today, we're focusing entirely on actionable strategies to secure your home and protect them from the very real dangers of wandering. To really grasp why we're talking about this today, consider this: 60%. That's the number of people living with dementia who will wander off at some point. And it's usually not just a one-time thing, they'll often do it repeatedly. This isn't some rare edge case, it's an incredibly common reality tied directly to the physical changes happening in the brain. I want to share a quote from a caregiver that really hits the nail on the head. He left in the rain at night. That night, I awoke to him banging on the door to be let in. It was pouring rain and he was barefoot. Just imagine that sheer panic, waking up realizing they've slipped out into the harsh weather, totally disoriented. It is a massive weight on families. All right, let's make this manageable. We're going to break things down into 5 steps: the reality of wandering, securing the home environment, tech and locating devices, preparing for an emergency, and finally, the immediate action protocol. Step 1, the reality of wandering, understanding the why. Before we can actively prevent wandering, we really need to normalize it and understand exactly why it's happening. You know, wandering isn't actually random at all. It's usually a purposeful search. They might be trying to go to a job they retired from 20 years ago, or maybe they're looking for a former home. Sometimes it's just unmet basic needs, like they're thirsty or in pain but just can't express it. It can also flare up at night, which is known as sundowning, or even just from a noisy, overstimulating room. Oh, and here's a fascinating detail from search and rescue pros. A wandering person will almost always follow the direction of their dominant hand. Keep that in mind, because it is absolutely crucial for search efforts later. Moving right along to step 2, securing the home environment. Making some really simple modifications to your space acts as a powerful first line of defense. To someone with dementia, a plain, standard door is basically a giant exit sign. But if you visually disguise those exterior doors by painting them the exact same color as the surrounding walls or just hiding them behind a curtain, you completely remove that visual trigger. It's quite literally out of sight, out of mind. Another super effective physical trick plays with line of sight. Basically, if they don't see a lock, they probably won't try to open it. So just move your slide bolt locks way up high on the doorframe or completely down near the floor. It takes the lock completely out of the area where a person with memory loss might think to look. There are a bunch of other quick fixes you could honestly do this weekend. Keep triggers like car keys, coats, and shoes totally hidden. And here's a really clever trick. Put a dark, solid-colored mat right in front of the exit door. Because dementia often messes with depth perception, that black mat looks like a gaping hole in the floor to them, which stops them right in their tracks. You can also try hanging simple stop or do not enter signs. The brain often still respects those authoritative cues. And remember, wandering is also a way to burn energy, so make sure they have a safe enclosed space indoors or outdoors to just comfortably pace. Okay, step 3, tech and locating devices. Let's talk about the invisible safety nets we have access to now. Physical locks are great for slowing things down, sure, but smart home technology, it's a real game changer, especially for nighttime wandering, which we know causes massive caregiver burnout. These smart systems can actually detect the exact moment someone gets out of bed. They can automatically turn on soft lights to guide them safely to the washroom, and even play a pre-recorded message in your familiar voice telling them it's time to go back to sleep. And the best part? All of this happens without you even having to wake up. For more immediate alerts, you can easily stick some motion sensors near your exit doors or near risky spots, like a kitchen with a hot stove. If they cross that invisible boundary, a chime goes off in your bedroom. It just gives you that complete peace of mind while you're trying to sleep, knowing you'll hear it the second they try to leave. But hey, what if they actually do manage to get out? Well, that's where wearables become absolutely non-negotiable. We're talking GPS tracking devices hidden in shoes or jewelry, and medical ID bracelets like the Medical Alert Safely Home program. These link straight to 24-hour support networks and tell first responders immediately that this person has dementia, speeding up their safe return. Which leads us directly into step 4, preparing for an emergency. Hoping this won't happen is simply not a strategy. Before an emergency ever strikes, you need to build an identification kit. Frankly, you should put this together today. Grab a recent close-up photo of their face, write down their current height and weight, and list all their medical conditions and medications. Also, jot down places they might try to go, like their old office or a favorite diner from years ago. And whatever you do, don't keep this information a secret. Talk to your trusted neighbors, let them know what's going on so they can be an extra set of eyes. You can even proactively hand a copy of that ID kit over to your local police department. That way, if you ever have to make that terrifying 911 call, law enforcement is already aware of the wandering risks at your address. Make sure you familiarize yourself with local community alert networks too. In the US, it's most commonly known as the Silver Alert System, though some states call it Maddie's Call or a Missing Senior Alert. When activated by police, this system blasts their loved one's description across local TV, radio, and digital highway signs, mobilizing the entire town to help look for them.
And finally, step 5, the immediate action protocol. Okay, we are on high alert now. If you discover they're missing, you have to execute this rapid-fire checklist. First, do a quick sweep of the house and yard. Now, most wanderers are found within a mile and a half of where they started, so search that immediate vicinity. But, and this is critical, do not search for more than 15 minutes. If 15 minutes go by and you haven't found them, stop and call 911 right away. Tell the dispatcher it's a missing person with dementia, so they elevate it to a medical emergency. Then, hand over that ID kit to the police and make sure to mention any medical bracelets. When they are safely found, whether by you, a neighbor, or the police, remember that they are probably completely terrified. Approach them casually from the front so they can see you coming. Whatever you do, don't argue with them or scold them. Just give them some warm reassurance. Maybe suggest going home for a nice cup of tea. There is absolutely zero blame here. They are just navigating a very difficult disease. Navigating dementia care is profoundly difficult. There is no way around that. But by understanding the triggers, setting up physical and tech barriers, and locking in your emergency plan, you really are taking back control. So I'll leave you with this one vital question to ask yourself tonight. If they walked out that door right now, are you ready?
Welcome to This Explainer. You know, if you've ever cared for someone experiencing dementia, you already know the daily heartbreak of traditional care. It's that heavy focus on what's slipping away, right? The lost memories, the fading skills. It's tough. But what if we've been looking at this entirely the wrong way? Today, we're going to uncover a truly empowering, science-backed approach that completely shifts the focus. We're going to explore the resilient mind and discover the powerful abilities that remain intact way, way longer than we ever thought possible.
It's a pretty profound question, isn't it? What happens to an emotion when the memory of what caused it fades away? Think about it. Do you stop feeling sad just because you forgot why you were crying? Or do you stop feeling joyful just because you forgot the punchline of a joke? Okay, let's dive into this because the answer literally unlocks a completely new way to connect with our loved ones.
To really get this, we need to define the core philosophy of our explainer, the strength-based approach. Look, for decades, standard care has been completely obsessed with deficits, what's lost. But this approach, it's fundamentally different. It's about identifying and utilizing a person's existing abilities and their incredible resilience. It's a conscious decision to stop treating care recipients as passive dependents and instead empower them as active participants in their own journey.
This shift in thinking is actually best understood by comparing two distinct models of care, which are championed by methodologies like the Dawn method. So the traditional medical model is designed to deliver treatments and cures. But here's the reality. Currently, dementia doesn't have a cure. So relying strictly on a medical model, it often just leads to massive frustration for everyone. The experiential model, on the other hand, accepts the person exactly as they are right now. True care under this model means changing the environment to accommodate their emotional needs so they can actually thrive. Now that we have our framework, let's look at the hard neurology that proves this isn't just wishful thinking.
Section 1. The enduring emotional mind. Notice the striking physical difference between a healthy brain and an amnesic one when looking at these MRI scans. The brain with severe amnesia shows massive bilateral damage to the hippocampus. That's the brain's memory center. Well, an absolutely fascinating study published in PNAS capitalized on patients with severe amnesia, exactly like this, to test a really bold theory. Could they disconnect the experience of an emotion from the factual memory of what actually caused it?
The results were honestly staggering. Researchers induced sadness and happiness in these patients using film clips, and within minutes, their factual memory of the films vanished entirely, completely gone. But the intense emotional states, they persisted for up to 30 minutes. Take patient M1, for example. She exhibited tearful crying during a sad clip. Minutes later, she had absolutely zero memory of the film, yet her sadness lingered much longer than even the healthy control subjects. This is huge. It proves that feelings are real and they endure, even when the declarative memory totally fails. How we make someone feel matters long after they forget what we actually said. But emotions aren't the only things that survive. Let's pivot to another incredibly resilient part of the human mind.
Section 2, Muscle and Musical Memory. So, dementia ravages declarative memory, the facts, the names, the dates, right? But procedural memory, that is the how-to engine of the brain. It governs our habits, our movement, our intuitive actions. And this is exactly why someone might forget their daughter's name, but still know exactly how to get out of a chair, read a simple sign on a door, or even play a beautiful song on the piano. This procedural system survives deep, deep into the disease.
And then there's the absolute magic of music. A University of Utah study, alongside some really advanced MRI research, found that personally meaningful, long-known music activates specific preserved regions of the brain. So the crucial point here is that these specific brain areas show very minimal atrophy in early Alzheimer's. Familiar music literally bypasses the damaged areas of the brain to facilitate attention, reward, and motivation. It essentially provides a direct alternative route to manage emotional distress. How incredible is that? Because of this robust neurology, the impact of music is actually highly measurable. For every single dollar invested in personalized music interventions, there is a $2.40 return. And that return isn't just financial, not at all. It represents immense quality of life value, increased social engagement, and vastly reduced behavioral stress, which actually often decreases the need for anxiety medications. So, okay, we know the why of the neurology. Now let's shift gears to the how of daily caregiving. How do we actually put this into practice?
Section 3, Actionable Frameworks, Dawn and Lead. And this brilliantly illustrates the path forward, the LEAD framework. That stands for Leveraging Existing Abilities in Dementia. It's a super pragmatic, evidence-based roadmap. It was developed for rehabilitation professionals, sure, but it is incredibly useful for families at home. Instead of just guessing how to manage care, this framework maps out practical pathways to safely connect with and support our loved ones based entirely on what they can still do. The LEAD framework is anchored by what we call the 3 C's. First up is communication, utilizing the KISS method. Keep it short and simple. Second is cognition, using external memory aids and errorless learning. And third is coping, reframing expectations and substituting behaviors. By proactively addressing these 3 areas, we can prevent what we mistakenly call dementia behaviors. Actually, scratch that. They aren't dementia behaviors at all. They are just human stress responses to an environment they no longer understand. All right, let's move into our final section and equip you with a hyper-specific toolkit.
Section 4, the Caregiver's Toolkit.
Let's look at spaced retrieval training and see how this builds directly upon what we just learned about procedural memory. It's a technique where you identify a really simple functional task, like, say, safely transferring from a bed to a chair. Now, instead of explaining it with words they're just going to forget, you use their muscle memory. You practice the action, and you ask them to perform it over progressively longer intervals of time. Because it relies entirely on learning by doing, they build a physical habit without ever needing to consciously remember the training session itself. It is a total game changer. Beyond specific training, here are some phenomenal daily strategies derived from the Dawn and Lead methods. First, keep your communication short to reduce their cognitive load. Instead of asking open-ended questions, which can be super overwhelming, narrow the choices down to a simple yes or no, or just hold up 2 physical items for them to choose from.
Exploit their preserved reading abilities by putting up bright, clear signs on the bathroom or exit doors. And perhaps most importantly, we have to accept anosognosia. That's the medical condition where they physically cannot comprehend that they are becoming impaired. Look, stepping into their reality rather than constantly forcing them to try and exist in yours significantly lowers the stress for absolutely everyone involved. I want to leave you with this incredibly validating quote. Turn the usual approach of viewing care recipients as passive or dependent into an approach that sees them as active participants in their own care journey. I know the effort you put in as a caregiver is absolutely immense, but by shifting your lens to focus on what remains intact, their emotions, their intuitive thought, their musical joy, you completely recenter their dignity and their identity. So, I'll leave you with one final question to consider as we wrap up this explainer. What preserved strength will you nurture in your loved one today? Will it be playing a favorite old song, using a simple visual choice for dinner, or maybe just sharing a quiet moment of emotional connection? The factual memory of the moment might fade, but the feeling you create, that will absolutely endure. Welcome to this explainer. Look, if you're tuning into this, chances are you're right in the thick of caring for a loved one with dementia. And before we get into any of the strategies today, I just want to pause and acknowledge the sheer weight of what you're carrying. The exhaustion, the grief, that deep aching longing for the person they used to be, it's a lot. It is a profoundly heavy load. Caregiving is literally an act of love in its purest form. But let's be honest, the hardest moments are rarely the quiet ones, right? According to our source material, the toughest days are usually the ones packed with resistance, confusion, agitation, and fear. Which brings us to the question you probably ask yourself, every single day. Why isn't reasoning working anymore? You know the feeling. You're trying to perfectly, logically explain something like why they need their medication or why a certain memory isn't quite right. And instead of helping, your reassurance just seems to throw fuel on the fire. You're trying so hard to help, but it feels like you're just hitting a brick wall. So why does staying calm matter so much when every bone in your body just wants to correct the situation and fix it? Okay, let's dive into Section 1, Why Reasoning Fails, and take a quick look at the brain under stress.
Now, understanding what's actually happening beneath those frustrating behaviors can seriously lift a massive amount of guilt right off your shoulders. There's this heartbreaking disconnect between what we, as caregivers, try to do and what a dementia-affected brain actually feels. We naturally want to explain and correct because, well, that's how we've solved problems our whole lives. But when that brain is under stress, it instantly flips into protection mode. New information, it just can't get in. Logic is locked away. So when you try to insist on the facts, the brain doesn't feel helped. It feels threatened. It feels overloaded and attacked. This resistance you're facing isn't stubbornness or defiance. It's literally just a brain doing the absolute best it can with a very limited set of resources.
Moving right along to Section 2, Dementia and Stress Combined. Let's see how these two interact.
So, this brings us to a really crucial concept. Dementia doesn't just happen in a vacuum. It interacts powerfully with stress. Think about it. When a brain is already working overtime just to process the basics, everyday environmental stuff can totally overload a fragile nervous system. We're talking about hidden stressors. It could be a blaring TV in the background, or just the feeling of being rushed out the door. Maybe it's a tiny change in routine, physical discomfort, or just unspoken fear. What we often label as difficult behavior is really just a distress signal from a nervous system screaming, hey, this is way too much for me right now. And here's exactly why your words aren't fixing it. The body reacts way before words can even help. When stress shoots up, that physical response, the racing heart, the tense muscles, the shallow breathing, happens long before the mind can even try to formulate or process language. The emotion and that physical sensation stick around way after the ability to use words fades. Because of that, your tone of voice and your body language matters so much more than having the perfect logical explanation. Let's look at Section 3, When Words Stop Working, and how our communication changes. This brings us to a really painful transition in the dementia journey, the point where words just stop working. It can feel so final and honestly pretty terrifying. Conversations get shorter, the silence grows. But I really want to reassure you here, based on these guides, communication itself isn't ending. It's just changing form. Love absolutely does not disappear when words do. In dementia, the brain almost always lets go of language long before it lets go of emotion. Your loved one might not find the right word or any word at all, but they are absolutely still feeling your safety, your familiarity, and your comfort. Most importantly, they still feel your love.
You aren't failing just because talking is getting harder. You're just learning a new, quieter way to be together. Which naturally brings us to section 4, connecting without words. It's all about your presence over everything else.
So, if words are off the table, how do we actually connect? Let's pivot from the why to the how and build a practical toolkit. Now, what's really interesting here is how simple these visual cues for gentle connection are. Soften your face. A calm expression feels a million times safer than a dozen words. Slow your pace right down. Move gently. Take the pressure off the moment. And use a warm tone. Even if they have no idea what vocabulary you're actually using, the warmth in your voice communicates instant safety.
These are highly actionable physical steps you can take right now to establish a connection without demanding a conversation. Sit down right at their eye level. Make soft, inviting eye contact. Don't stare them down. Just keep it gentle. And here's a big one. Sit beside them instead of across from them. Sitting across can feel confrontational, like an interview, right? But sitting beside them feels cooperative and safe. Slow down your body. Remember, your physical presence, without any pressure on them to perform or speak, is a profound form of care. Keep this framework in your mental back pocket as a real-time reference guide for navigating those difficult moments. Instead of quizzing them and testing their memory, like, "Don't you remember what we did today?" Just try saying, "I'm here," or "You're safe." Skip the urge to correct every little inaccurate detail. Just offer your hand if they welcome it, or put on some soft, familiar music. Avoid rushing or throwing too much information at them at once. Just pause, take a breath, and let them know we can go slowly.
So, the crucial point we really need to take away is this. Connection absolutely must come before conversation. If they feel recognized, if they feel your calm presence instead of feeling corrected, their fear naturally starts to soften. And when fear drops, cooperation becomes so much easier and care just starts to flow more naturally.
And never ever underestimate the power of the senses when words fail. These gentle sensory connections aren't just distractions, they're vital pathways. The body remembers comfort even when the mind can't process language. Playing familiar hymns, the shared warmth of holding a coffee mug together, the feel of a favorite soft blanket, or even just the familiar scent of a certain soap or cologne. These things act as deep emotional anchors for a nervous system that feels totally adrift.
Finally, let's head into Section 5, the power of gentle care, focusing on the caregiver's internal state.
Everything we've talked about so far hinges on one main thing: you. Your internal state and your steadiness are literally your greatest tools. The sources we're exploring ground this in a really beautiful, faith-informed perspective, quoting Ecclesiastes. Better is the patient in spirit than the proud in spirit. In the context of caregiving, patience and gentleness, they are definitely not signs of passivity or weakness. They are acts of incredible enduring strength. It's endurance without the resentment. It's actively choosing peace when forcing the issue would just fail anyway.
This totally redefines what virtue actually means for a caregiver. It's not about being morally perfect or getting it right every single time. It's about being a stabilizing force. Your patience literally slows down a panicked moment. Your gentleness lowers the perceived threat in the room. Your charity makes space for their imperfection and honestly makes space for your own too. When you step in with calm confidence, you act as a shared resource that regulates their unsteady nervous system. You are literally lending them your calm.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final, provocative question to just sit with today. How can I offer steadiness rather than urgency today? Look, the diagnosis isn't going to change, and the grief is incredibly real. But your steadfast presence, your willingness to just sit quietly in the silence, and your choice to prioritize connection over correction, that can absolutely change the experience, both for the person you love and for you. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this vital topic. Take a deep breath. Your presence is still reaching them.
Welcome to this explainer. You know, today we're diving into something incredibly complex and deeply emotional. It's a reality that a lot of you might actually be living right now: caring for a loved one with dementia. We're going to unpack this by looking at a very specific and honestly, often unspoken kind of pain. Our goal here is to help map out a real path toward understanding and resilience.
So let's just jump right into this with a pretty profound paradox. It's a question that really captures the agonizing limbo caregivers find themselves in every single day. How do you grieve someone who is still sitting right in front of you? It's a jarring thought, right? But it's exactly that tension that makes this specific type of caregiving so uniquely difficult.
To help us wrap our heads around this, we're using a fantastic resource guide published by the Alzheimer's Society of Canada. It's called Ambiguous Loss and Grief in Dementia. And what's so incredible about this guide is that it goes way beyond your standard caregiving tips. It gives us a really powerful, structured psychological framework for healing, not just for the person with dementia, but for the whole family.
Section 1. The hidden grief of dementia and naming the pain.
Okay, so the absolute crucial starting point here is understanding a concept known as ambiguous loss. Basically, this is a type of loss that happens when a person is physically right there in the room with you, but psychologically, they're sometimes absent. You see, this is grief without the finality or the closure of a sudden death. It leaves you in this constant rolling state of uncertainty, literally mourning someone who is still alive.
To really ground this, listen to this quote from a male caregiver. He says, "I'm still married to my wife. I love her, but I don't live with her. The ambiguity is exactly how I feel." I mean, that just perfectly captures the reality of it, doesn't it? Feeling completely devoted to your spouse while simultaneously mourning the relationship you used to have. You're just caught right between two worlds.
And because this ambiguous loss is so incredibly hard to pin down and explain, it often morphs into what experts call disenfranchised grief. This happens when your grief